Small Spaces by Kathy Arden, Chapter 17. Ollie caught one of her duck-printed rain boots under a tree root and went down with a cry, ripping her jeans and smearing herself with mud. Brian stopped when she yelled, and Coco tripped over her, knocking the wind out of them both. "Come on!" cried Brian, while Ollie and Coco lay wheezing on the ground. He was faster than either of them, what with the hockey and everything, but he waited for them, panting. "We have to go!" Ollie got to her hands and knees, still heaving for breath. She looked around. "No one's chasing us," she said. "We'll only exhaust ourselves." "Are you okay, Coco?" "I think so," she said, rubbing her knees. Brian was scanning the woods, but Ollie had been right. There was no one in the woods but them. Almost no one. Ollie jumped with a little cry. "Look!" Written on a tree trunk a few paces away, in sloppy white letters, were two words. "Still watching." Below, a new scarecrow, wearing an old-fashioned flowered dress, leaned against a tree. Both her hands were paintbrushes. "Come on, come on!" cried Coco, scrambling up. "Hang on," said Ollie. "If the scarecrows could get us in daylight, they would have back at Kathy Webster's house. It's like the bus driver said." She walked up to the scarecrow. It didn't move. She poked it. It felt like an ordinary scarecrow, clothed over straw. "Are you crazy?" Coco demanded. "They're watching us. If they can't grab us during the day, all they have to do is watch us until dark." "Were those scarecrows really Caleb and Jonathan?" asked Brian. "Or did that crazy ghost just think they were?" "I don't know," said Ollie. She found herself hoping Kathy was wrong, but she wasn't sure. Jonathan had promised to serve the smiling man, and the bus driver had called the scarecrows his servants. "Why can't they get us during the day?" Brian asked. "Something about them being only part way in the sunshine world," said Ollie. "They're weaker." The bus driver said, I don't know." "Sunshine world?" said Brian. "So they're in both worlds, even though we aren't? I wonder if they know a way for us to get home." "Also, what was Kathy doing here?" Coco piped up. "If she's the lady from your book, Ollie..." Ollie didn't know that either. She hoped neither of the others could see her shiver. To reassure herself, Ollie looked down at her watch. The countdown read 2 hours, 50 minutes, 45 seconds. They still had a while until sundown, and the old word, river. Okay, that was what food had meant. Don't eat the food. Duh. She opened her mouth to tell Brian and Coco about her watch, then closed it again. "Do you hear that?" Brian asked suddenly. They all went still, listening. "Is that running water?" asked Coco. "Leith Creek," said Brian. "Finally. Come on. If you've had enough playing chicken with that creepy thing, Ollie, let's go. I'm thirsty." They hurried on, not without several backward glances. Ahead of them came the sound of roaring water. They could just see it shining through the trees when Brian halted and said, "Hold up a minute. Ollie, you're bleeding." Ollie hadn't noticed. She looked down and saw a good-sized gash on her knee. "I've got a Band-Aid in my bag," Brian said. "Let's clean it off at least. The last thing you need now is tetanus." "Tetanus," said Ollie. "We'll just have to get in line behind dehydration, exposure, starving, and, oh right, kidnapping by evil scarecrows." But she didn't protest when Brian dug into his bag and got out a tiny first aid kit. "They'll definitely make you an Eagle Scout for this," said Coco, impressed. Brian looked proud of himself. He dug out an alcohol pad, some Neosporin, and a Snoopy Band-Aid and passed them to Ollie. She wiped away the blood, dabbed on some ointment, and stuck the Snoopy on it, and felt strangely better. While they were at it, Coco changed the Band-Aid on her chin, and Ollie changed the one on the back of Brian's head. They all felt better after, not because they had such bad cuts or anything, but more because the last 24 hours had been so full of mysteries and impossible problems and being scared. It was a relief to deal with an ordinary problem like a scraped knee. "Thanks, Brian," said Ollie, meaning it. Brian looked a little embarrassed. "Don't mention it." "Let's go before the scarecrows come," Coco said. "Or the ghost." She was shifting from foot to foot. Ollie had a sudden mental image of a skull-headed woman floating toward them, feet not quite touching the ground, with her 2 scarecrow sons lurching along behind. Excuse me. She shivered and got to her feet. They started off downhill toward the roaring water. Brian was looking worried. That gingerbread, he said. It wasn't like Persephone, was it? Coco looked puzzled, but Ollie got it. Persephone ate food in the underworld after being abducted by Hades, she explained. As a consequence of eating there, she had to spend part of every year in the underworld forever. Oh, okay, hold on. So, because Ollie and Brian are both big readers, they know this myth of Hades and Persephone. Persephone, when she ate food in the underworld, Hades is kind of the god of the underworld, then that meant when she ate food, she had to be in the underworld for a part of every year, forever. Ew. So now they're scared that maybe they ate food that's going to keep them there, keep them in this weird world. Okay, now Coco looked scared. I don't think I ate the gingerbread, she said. I think I spat it out. Me too, said Brian. I spat it out. We shouldn't have eaten it in the first place, but I was hungry. It's probably okay, said Ollie. Besides, we have to drink the water, and that comes from here too. She shook her empty bottle for emphasis and pointed to the foaming creek. Now Brian and Coco looked very uncertain. There might be weird rules to this place that we don't know about, said Ollie. But dehydration is real. So is dysentery, said Brian. Leith Creek goes past how many farms? So dysentery is a disease you get by drinking dirty water. In the real world it does, said Ollie, but here, have you seen any animals? Like any? I thought I saw eyes the first night, said Coco. Green eyes. Like a raccoon or something? But maybe I was wrong. I thought I heard an animal padding around while we were walking, Brian admitted, but I didn't see anything. We're still going to have to risk the creek, said Ollie. We won't get far without water. While Brian and Coco waited, she went down the slippery bank of Leith Creek. The water looked colder and darker and faster here. It whispered against the rocks like it had a voice. Ollie hurriedly filled her bottle and went back to the others. Here, she said, have a sip, and a snack will make us all feel better. Ollie got the chocolate chip muffin from her lunchbox. She broke it into 3 pieces and passed it around. They all munched for a few minutes. Man, said Brian, looking happier, your dad really can bake. Yeah, said Ollie, and felt tears pricking her eyes. He knits, too. He knitted my socks. Don't be sad, Ollie, Coco said at once. You'll see him again. We all will. Coco lifted her chin. After we beat those scarecrows. You tell him, Tiny, said Brian, and Coco glared. Ollie grinned and took a cautious sip from her bottle. The water was cold and a little metallic. Brian said, I really hope you're right. Drank and passed the bottle to Coco. Is this hell? Coco whispered, small-voiced, after she drank. Nope, said Ollie. It definitely isn't. Hell wouldn't be so wet. Besides, we didn't do anything bad. Also, we're not dead. She wasn't really religious herself, and Brian looked doubtful, but he said, Don't worry, Tiny. Don't call me Tiny, said Coco. I'm normal. You're just big. Ollie barely heard their sniping. She had remembered something. When I met her by the creek, Linda Webster was talking about making a bargain. With the smiling man, maybe? Brian asked. Just like Jonathan? Her soul for... Ollie's lips pressed together. Not her own soul. Ours. That's why we ended up here. One busload of kids, signed, sealed, delivered for whatever he gave her. That doesn't seem fair, said Brian. No one asked us. Ollie thought of a torn-up field in the rain. A lot of things aren't fair, she said. What now? She glanced down at her watch. House, it said. To their right, a narrow covered footbridge crossed the creek, high above the racing water. On the other side of the creek lay cornfields, a vegetable garden, berry patches, hog pens, a cattle shed. Only it wasn't a tidy collection of buildings like yesterday. This farm was old, worn. They couldn't see any signs of life, but that didn't mean there weren't any. There were a lot of scarecrows. They jutted out of the field. They clustered around the house. You sure they aren't dangerous before dark? Brian muttered. Mostly sure, said Ollie. Do you think there are any answers over there? Brian asked, because honestly, a lot of scarecrows, and there's not that much daylight left. Maybe we should stay on this side of the creek. Yes, said Ollie. I think there are answers over there. She took a deep breath. So, guys, there's something I haven't told you, and it might be just my imagination, but Ollie explained about her watch. Neither Brian nor Coco said anything for a moment. Then Coco said logically, well, if Kathy Webster's here, then I'd bet anything your mom is here too, helping us. She smiled. That makes me feel better. Me too, said Brian. Really? Said Ollie, enormously relieved. Yep, said Brian. Guess we're going to the house. Coco? Let's go look, said Coco nervously, but we have to find somewhere to hide before dark. They headed for the footbridge. As they walked, Ollie saw that Coco's stupid heart-printed sneakers were soaked. She'd probably had cold feet for the whole day, but hadn't complained, not once. Coco is all right, Ollie thought. Aloud, she said, come on, an hour until sunset. Seems like the day should have been longer, said Brian. Yesterday, too. It got dark really soon after we left the bus. Bad Narnia, said Ollie. I guess it's darker here. Below them, Leith Creek ran fast and cold in the evening light. A mist was just gathering in the cornfield. The mist was rising. Yeah,